We are rolling through the program. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us. We talked in the open of the first hour of the program about all the 2-0 teams and who kind of stood out to us. My thought, and this may be a sadness, the list of sadness with all of the 0-2 teams. And to me, there is one element of the 0-2 teams that stand out, and you think to yourself, wow, I can't believe they're 0-2. All right, so here are the teams. I'm going to run through right now all the teams that are 0-2. And as we said earlier in the program, if you're 2-0, you have roughly a 61.3% chance to make the playoffs historically. But remember, you now have 7 AFC and 7 NFC. If you're 0-2, you have a 12.6% chance. Again, a little bit better chances to make the playoff than these numbers would reflect because there are now more teams that are going to be able to make the playoffs. But to me, what stands out here as you run through the list is a lot of the teams that aren't very good are the teams that we thought would not be very good coming into the season. In other words, it's not a surprise that they're 0-2. The Bengals, the Jets, the Dolphins, the Giants, I would say the Lions. Not that those teams didn't have a reason to be excited about their expectations, because there's always teams that go from worst in the division to best. But those are teams that I don't think we anticipated necessarily being very good. And even like the Bengals, who are 0-2, coming off that Thursday night game, I think there are a lot of Bengals fans who think, hey, even though we're 0-2, there's a lot of reasons for optimism. Joe Burrow has looked phenomenal. And, hey, we're not that far away from being a pretty decent team. And even some of these 0-2 teams, like I'll give you an example, the Broncos, I know they got the injury to Drew Lock, but they could easily be 2-0, right? There's not that much difference between the way that they perform. But to me, the teams that are right now 0-2, and you're like, uh-oh, there's no way we should be 0-2. The three biggest disappointments are the Texans, even though the schedule was tough, the Eagles, and the Vikings, okay? And I would say in particular, what is fascinating to me about these teams is the Eagles, there's no way they should have lost to the Redskins, right? AKA the Washington football team. There's no telling how many times I'm going to call them the Redskins. The Vikings, I think the way that they performed yesterday against the Colts, it makes you feel a little bit ominous, right? Not that they necessarily lost, but the way they got whipped. And the Texans in particular, their schedule is brutal, but when you actually look at it, you say, okay, maybe we didn't expect to beat the Chiefs, and maybe we didn't expect to beat the Ravens, but they got dominated. And that is why I would circle the Texans and the Vikings in particular and say, this is an interesting storyline that I don't think is getting enough attention as you break down these two teams. And let me explain what that is. It is that the Vikings traded away Stephon Diggs. And they traded him to the Bills, and Stephon Diggs went off yesterday. And the Bills are now 2-0. And oh, by the way, there was a lot of questions about what was going to happen with the ability of Josh Allen with the Bills, and he's suddenly thrown for over 300 yards both of the first two games. And if anything, if you're a Bills fan, what you look at and say is, man, our defense hasn't really been as good as our defense was last year, but our offense has been light years better. We look a lot more explosive. Josh Allen went for over 400 yards, and Stephon Diggs went for over 150, and suddenly the Bills are 2-0. Meanwhile, the team that he left, the Vikings, 0-2. Adam Thielen can't get open. Josh Jefferson, a little bit too young to be able to get open. And that offense has kind of fallen apart, even with Dalvin Cook. They had the offseason holdout, everything else. But, again, Stephon Diggs is there, and they're a pretty good team. Win a playoff game. Go down to New Orleans. Go out of New Orleans. Get a win there. He leaves. The team he joins is 2-0 and looks a lot better offensively. The team that he was with, nowhere near as good as they were before. Kirk Cousins, 3 interceptions in week 2. Offense is awful, all right? About the Texans. Texans gave $100 million to Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson has had DeAndre Hopkins his entire career. Look at how good DeAndre Hopkins is right now for Kyler Murray. The Arizona Cardinals are a surprising 2-0. The Houston Texans are an awful 0-2. And I've been saying this about the Texans for a while. As soon as the schedule came out, I said, uh-oh for the Texans. Gets a lot easier on the back half. But that first half, they're going to play themselves right out of the playoffs. I think there's a good chance that the Texans are going to start either 1-6 or 2-5. And they are not going to be able to blow up in any kind of way and replace DeAndre Hopkins. And much like Adam Thielen is not as good without Stephon Diggs, the Texans right now are not able to exploit and push the ball down the field without all of the attention being paid to DeAndre Hopkins. And Will Fuller's always got hurt hamstrings and everything else, but he was a major downfield threat. Kenny Stills, those guys were able to make plays last year when they were healthy with DeAndre Hopkins on the field because DeAndre Hopkins created so much of an issue. Have you seen what DeAndre Hopkins is doing right now with the Arizona Cardinals? He's absolutely dominating. I was watching the game. They put up a stat on the screen. No first-year wide receiver with a new team, traded, signed as a free agent, however you want to classify it. Nobody has been as good as DeAndre Hopkins has been so far for the Cardinals. And he looks like an incredible security blanket now for Kyler Murray, which is exactly what I expected to happen. His performance on the field has already been extraordinary. Not even necessarily in the total number of catches he's had, because he had 8 for 68 yesterday, but in just his consistency so far. 8 receptions, 68 yards, and a touchdown. 14 receptions in week 1 against the 49ers for 150 yards. And here is what DeAndre Hopkins does. Man, he gets open. 8 receptions on 9 targets for DeAndre Hopkins. Basically, every time Kyler Murray looked to him, he's open. Against the 49ers, 14 catches on 16 targets. You put the ball in the vicinity of that man, and he makes a play. And the Cardinals now are 2-0, and the Texans are 0-2. Making me believe that we have, as a group, including certainly the Texans and the Vikings, drastically undervalued the impact of DeAndre Hopkins and Stephon Diggs on their teams and what impact they can have. Worth keeping in mind, we talk a lot about quarterbacks, but how much of Deshaun Watson's success was predicated on having the security blanket of DeAndre Hopkins, and how much of Kirk Cousins' success was predicated on having the security blanket of Stephon Diggs? I think you're starting to see the answer was a tremendous amount, particularly early on, and the growing pains that are going to be involved there.